2022 was the longest season of all time. Well, that is until the 2023 season gets underway, and there's possibly going to be 24 races, with the Chinese Grand Prix potentially happening now. So with that in mind, today I'm going to rank every race from the worst to best for the 2022 season. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button and subscribe for more F1 content. Approximately 75% of my viewers are not currently subscribed to my channel. If you're one of those, please do me a little favour and just tap that little subscribe button. You know you want to. Without any further ado, let's get into this. Now, for the ranking, I'm not going to be taking delays into account, such as, the Monaco delay, Singapore's delay, and also the Japan delay. It's purely down to what happened when racing. In 22nd place, I've gone for the Emilia Romagna Grand Prix at Imola. This is a race that was ruined, in my opinion, by the sprint race. In qualifying, we had a mixed up grid, but by the end of the sprint, that mixed up grid was back to normal, which is always a negative in my opinion. But then the race itself got underway, and well, this race was just dull. In the sprint race there was 18 overtakes, but in the full Grand Prix there was only 23 overtakes, and there was no real battles for any exciting positions. This race was hurt by the fact that the FIA were overly cautious on activating the DRS. The drivers changed from intermediates onto slicks on about lap 20, but the DRS was not activated until lap 34. But by this point, all of the drivers were stuck in trains and they couldn't really do anything. In the end, Max Verstappen took victory, and by the way, get used to hearing this comment. In 21st place, I've gone for the Mexico City Grand Prix. This Grand Prix is a race that is hampered by where it is situated in the world. This circuit, in theory, should be a decent track for racing, especially with the absolutely massive pit straight. But because of the altitude, the cars run Monaco-style rear wings, but yet there is somehow a majorly reduced slipstream as the cars don't produce as much drag, meaning that the DRS itself is fairly ineffective. During this Grand Prix, there was a grand total of 24 overtakes, so only one more than at Imola. On the bright side, because there is such a small amount of slipstream, each overtake requires a lot of skill and a lot more battling. But honestly, that couldn't save this from being one of the dullest races of the year. There was absolutely no fight for the lead whatsoever, as Max Verstappen spent the entire race just maintaining the gap to the Mercedes cars that was behind him, and yep, you guessed it, Max Verstappen won the Grand Prix. Next up in 20th place is the Monaco Grand Prix, which is kind of impressive because, well, Monaco is normally stone dead last because it is incredibly boring almost every single year. Especially when you take into account that the Indy 500 takes place on the same day. But this year's Monaco Grand Prix was actually helped by the rain. The heavy rain meant that the drivers had to start on full wet tyres, and this is where we got to see some real skill as the drivers managed their way around the tight and twisty streets in treacherous conditions. There were some brave overtakes that happened during this Grand Prix, and we got a close and exciting battle between Sergio Perez and Carlos Sainz for the lead of the Grand Prix. On any other circuit, Carlos Sainz would have probably found a way past Sergio Perez, but on the twisty streets, Sergio Perez was able to maintain the lead and win the Grand Prix. Next up in 19th place, I have gone for the Miami Grand Prix. Oh Miami, how you tried. You were the kid that's trying so desperately to be cool with your fake harbour, but in the end, you kinda just looked a bit tacky. The race itself was hard to judge because the event felt more like of a look who's here than a motor race, which is a shame because I have a feeling that the race was a lot better than the TV direction made it out to be. The TV director was focused on the front and missing out on a lot of action that was happening further back, and that can be seen by the fact that there was 52 overtakes, but for us watching on TV, it felt more like there was about 5 or 10 overtakes. There was a good fight between Charles Leclerc and Max Verstappen, but there was just a sense and a feeling that the end result would be a bit predictable. And well, it kind of was. Max Verstappen was able to hold off Charles Leclerc and take a victory. There was a good battle though between the Mercedes pair of Lewis Hamilton and George Russell. In 18th place, I've gone for the Australian Grand Prix. And you know what, man, it felt so good to be back in Australia for an F1 race. It's the first Grand Prix there since 2019, and it delivered the best Australian Grand Prix since the turbo hybrid era begun in 2014. The circuit was always notoriously difficult to overtake on, but an altered layout meant that finally we were able to get some more on-track overtakes, and that is exactly what we got. We got some great battles through the field, and there was still a risk of pushing too hard as well, as we found out when Carlos Sainz beached his car fairly early on into the gravel. This was a point of the season when there was still hope for a good title fight, as Charles Leclerc took victory and looked very much in control of this Grand Prix, whilst Max Verstappen DNF'd from the Grand Prix. And with 34 on-track overtakes, there was more overtakes at this one Grand Prix than there was at any Australian Grand Prix combined from 2017 to 2019. In 17th place, I have gone for the Singapore Grand Prix, and it's a bit of a shame that this race is so far down because it had all the potential of being an all-time classic, but they allowed the conditions to improve a little bit too much before the race got underway. That being said, as far as Singapore goes, it was a decent race. Now, not as good as the 2019 Grand Prix, which was probably the best Singapore Grand Prix that there has been, but it was still a great race. For Max Verstappen, this is a race where he had to come through the field and fight his way up, and he did just that. Also during this race, there was an incredible number of errors being made. Latifi and Zhou Guanyu hit each other, Albon hit the wall, Tsunoda nearly hit the wall, Hamilton hit the wall, and then a little bit later on, Tsunoda did actually hit the wall pretty hard. And then to top it all off, Max Verstappen, who I did say had a good fight through the field, he made a mistake and went straight on at Raffles Boulevard and dropped all the way back down the field. And Sergio Perez took his second and final win of the season at this race from Charles Leclerc in second place. A good race for Singapore, but still pretty low on the list. In 16th place, I've gone for the Japanese Grand Prix. Now I know what you might be thinking, this race should not be this high up on the grid. It was way too short. But for me, this race, it may have been very short-lived, but it was a very fun Japanese Grand Prix. This Grand Prix was short-lived due to all the cars starting on the wrong tyres. Really, they should have been on full wet, but opted to start on intermediates, and by the time that the race started, they were on the wrong tyres and chaos happened on the opening lap. After this though, we got a great sprint race, which saw the drivers being tested to their absolute limits. The intermediates were the right tyre this time, but they were struggling to last, and during the short-lived race, we saw some excellent racing with the likes of George Russell and Fernando Alonso carving their way through the field and making an extra pit stop, and also Esteban Ocon defending for his life against Lewis Hamilton. Charles Leclerc was also defending for his life against Sergio Perez, and in the final corner, on the last lap, he made a mistake and Sergio Perez finished in second place, whilst Max Verstappen absolutely dominated the Japanese Grand Prix and clinched his second world championship. In 15th place, I've gone for the Belgian Grand Prix at Spa. Oh, Spa. Thankfully, we got a race this year compared to last year, and for what it was an alright race. We got a lot of overtakes. It was actually the 5th highest number of overtakes all season, which is crazy. It had 74 on-track overtakes, but for some reason, it's still so low down the list. And it's probably because whilst, yes, there was 74 overtakes, but all the overtakes were just a little bit too easy as they launched off of Eau Rouge and Radion down the Kemmel Straight. It made things way too easily, especially for a certain Max Verstappen. Despite starting down in P14, it only took Max 12 laps to take the lead of the race and run away into the distance and absolutely dominate the Grand Prix. It could have been a much better race, but yeah, with things being so easy for Max Verstappen after the rule change that came into place after the mid-season break, yeah, it just ended up being a bit of a dull Belgian Grand Prix. And, well, you kind of got that sense that things were starting to be a little bit too easy for Max Verstappen. In 14th place, I've gone for the French Grand Prix. This is a race that had a potential also to be an absolute classic. This was a must-win race for Charles Leclerc if he was to keep his title hopes alive, and that meant he had to do something different to Max Verstappen. During the race, Leclerc and Verstappen were going wheel to wheel multiple times, but Verstappen just couldn't find a way through and passed Charles Leclerc. There was an excellent battle between these two, and it was so close. and so entertaining to watch. Eventually though, Max Verstappen opted to undercut Charles Leclerc and pit in early, but Charles, he decided to stay out, and it did not take too long before Charles Leclerc dropped it and eventually binned his car into the wall, allowing Max Verstappen to take an easy win. Behind though, Carlos Sainz had to fight his way through the field, and he did so in fantastic and thrilling fashion, making this actually a decent French Grand Prix, but of course Max Verstappen won the race. Again though, this is a race where the question is, what could have been? Just if Charles Leclerc didn't put his car into the wall during the race. And next up in P13, we have another race that was full of potential, and this was the Azerbaijan Grand Prix. Off the line, Charles Leclerc made a mistake, and that allowed Sergio Perez through to take the lead of the Grand Prix. As the race progressed though, we saw some strategy calls for once by Ferrari, which were not terrible. Carlos Sainz retired from the Grand Prix, and they boxed Charles Leclerc under the VSC, and this worked out nicely for Charles as he was able to close down the two Red Bulls. Verstappen overtook Sergio Perez on track for the lead of the Grand Prix, but when they both stopped, they were a long way behind Charles Leclerc, and surely this was a Charles win, right? Well, in typical Ferrari 2022 fashion, it all fell apart. As the lap after Verstappen stopped, Charles Leclerc broke down and was out of the Grand Prix, and in the end, Max Verstappen dominated the Grand Prix, but this race could have been so much better if Leclerc's power unit did not fail, because we could have got a fantastic on-track fight between Max Verstappen and Charles Leclerc. In P12, the Canadian Grand Prix in Montreal. Oh Canada, oh how we missed you. Yeah, it was the return of the Canadian Grand Prix, and off the lights, it looked like it was going to be an easy Verstappen win. Alonso was P2, and Charles Leclerc was at the back of the field. But multiple pit stops and reliability issues meant that this race was anything but a walk in the park. Yuki Tsunoda binned his AlphaTauri coming out of the pit lane, which prompted the safety car and gave Sainz a fresh tyre advantage. On the restart, and for the next 15 laps, there was a duel between Max Verstappen and Carlos Sainz. Carlos Sainz had the fresher tyres, but Verstappen had a faster car. Who would win out? Well, yeah, you already guessed it. Yes, it was Verstappen who won the race, but with 35 overtakes and Charles Leclerc making his way through the field, plus a very exciting battle between Carlos Sainz and Max Verstappen, this race made its way into P12 on my list this season. In P11, it's the Dutch Grand Prix at Zandvoort. Now this race was so close to the top 10, and probably in any other year, it would have been a definite top 10 race. But that just goes to show how fantastic all of the races were this year. It really was a good year for racers in F1, despite Max Verstappen absolutely dominating and winning everything. And guess what? He won this race as well. Shocking, I know. But in actually what is a shocking turn of events, he very easily could have not won this Grand Prix, if not for once again Yuki Tsunoda stopping and then starting again and then stopping again on track to bring out the safety car. And why did this help Max to win and lead Mercedes fans and Ferrari fans in unison to scream foul play? Well, it's because it essentially gifted Max a much needed safety car, and it was a little coincidental that the AlphaTauri team did this, but really there was no conspiracy theory. But it did essentially stop Mercedes from potentially getting their first win of the season, and maybe, just maybe, a 1-2 finish as well, as they were able to do a 1-stop whilst everyone else was on a 2-stop strategy. But at the restart, Max Verstappen flew past Lewis Hamilton and into the lead of the Grand Prix, and then George Russell came steaming through past Lewis Hamilton and into P2, and it was so close between George Russell and Lewis Hamilton coming together. They almost collided when Russell was trying to pass him, but yes, in the end, it was another Max Verstappen win. Now to the top 10, and I just want to say that if you are enjoying the video, please hit the like button and subscribe for more F1 content. This is probably one of the bigger videos that I will do this year, and it has taken a while to script, record and edit, so I would appreciate it if you just tap that little like button and subscribe for more F1 content if you have not done so already. But without any further ado, let's get into the top 10 for my racers in 2022. In P10, it's the Italian Grand Prix at Monza. Italy, the home of Ferrari, pizza, Piastri and the Tifosi. Surely, if there was a place for Ferrari to win, it would be... Nah, Max wins again. But for an Italian Grand Prix, it's fair to say that the Ferrari team put on a show. Carlos Sainz started towards the back of the grid and he put on an overtaking masterclass in his Ferrari. And this Italian Grand Prix had over 58 on-track overtakes, which for Monza is a lot. You would think this circuit would produce a lot of overtakes, but in reality it struggles for that because of the low downforce configurations. Slipstream is not very powerful, but even so, Sainz was able to pull off a lot of overtakes, and Ferrari for some reason put Charles Leclerc on a two-stop strategy at one of the lowest tyre wear circuits of the year. Yeah, I don't get why they did that either, but in the end, Max Verstappen won the Grand Prix from Charles Leclerc in second place. In P9, the pain for Ferrari fans continues as we have the Spanish Grand Prix, and this was a great Spanish Grand Prix, and certainly better than the last few years of races were there. It was a race that had a lot of errors, mistakes, and fantastic comeback drives. Leclerc led off the line, and it looked like things were going to be smooth sailing for the Ferrari driver, much like the crew on the Titanic thought it was going to be smooth sailing. But behind him, all hell was breaking loose. Firstly, Kevin Magnussen and Lewis Hamilton came together, putting both drivers at the back of the field, and then Carlos Sainz dropped it into the gravel, and then a couple of laps later, Max Verstappen did the exact same thing. Surely, Leclerc was going to win this race, but then, much like the Titanic, the hearts of the Tifosi sunk when Charles Leclerc's engine failed, and it robbed him from an easy victory. From victory came retirement. From that retirement came the opportunity though for George Russell to almost grab it with both hands and win the Grand Prix. This was his moment. He duelled with Max Verstappen and they fought very hard but fair, overtaking and re-overtaking each other multiple times. But in the end though, Mercedes could not live with the Red Bull and Verstappen took a brilliant victory in a thrilling race. In 8th place is the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. Now, hold all the angry comments. I know what you are thinking, the circuit is trash, it can never produce, but let me tell you, this year's Abu Dhabi Grand Prix was a great race, and not just because it was recency bias. Yes, Max dominated and won pretty easily, but the fight for P2 in the championship between Leclerc and Perez saw both drivers duel, swap places a couple of times for P2 in the race and championship. Not only that, but we saw Hamilton and Sainz overtake and then re-overtake each other a couple of times. The racing around this circuit for F1's usual standards at Abu Dhabi was great. The 2021 race, for example, was incredibly boring, right up of course until the last couple of laps, whereas the 2022 race had racing up and down the field all race long, and this was shown by the fact that there was a staggering 79 overtakes that happened on track at this year's Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. A fantastic race for that circuit. In 7th place is the Austrian Grand Prix. The Austrian GP was a fantastic race at a time in the season where it looked like Ferrari and Charles Leclerc still had a chance. In the sprint race the day before, Max Verstappen took victory, but was not feeling too confident for the race itself, and for good reason. In the main Grand Prix, Red Bull struggled with tyre wear versus the Ferrari team, but Red Bull was using quick thinking to try and outsmart Ferrari. It got to a point where Charles Leclerc actually overtook Max Verstappen 3 times during the Grand Prix at different moments to regain the lead. Further back, we also got the best indication of just how good these regulations can be when 5 cars were battling nose to tail for one position and overtaking each other multiple times, and also at multiple times they were going 3 abreast into a corner. Also, alongside all of this incredible racing, we got to see another Ferrari reliability disaster class when Carlos Sainz's car burst into flames, creating a very dangerous looking scene with him trying to get out of the car whilst it's rolling backwards and the car itself heavily on fire. Charles Leclerc in the end took victory during this Grand Prix, and it was an incredible race. In 6th place is the Hungarian Grand Prix. This was another excellent Grand Prix in the 2022 season, which saw George Russell and Mercedes take their only official pole position of the season, not of course starting from first in Brazil. This was a weird Grand Prix. The threat of rain was looming large over the circuit in cold and cool conditions. There was a mixture of tyre strategies at the start of the race, and Max Verstappen was starting way down the order due to a power unit penalty. This was the perfect race for Charles Leclerc and Ferrari to capitalise on Red Bull being down the field, and he did early on by getting into the lead of the Grand Prix from George Russell, and he was pulling away. In the meantime though, Max Verstappen was closing the gap quickly and flying through the field, but surely Charles had this in the bag, and he did, until Ferrari decided to stick him on hard tyres, which at the time made 0 sense. Fernando Alonso and Alpine earlier in the race tried the hard tyres, and it was a disastrous move. So why did Ferrari try it? Well, they tried it because they are Ferrari. In the end, even with a spin, Max Verstappen won the Grand Prix, and Charles Leclerc finished all the way down in P6, despite at one point leading the Grand Prix by a solid 5 to 10 seconds. During the race, there were 62 on-track overtakes, which for Hungary, which is often described as Monaco without the barriers, is an incredible achievement. And now to the top 5 races, and this is where we got to see some of the best races of the year. Firstly, in 5th place, the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. Now, this circuit is absolutely ridiculous and dangerous, and that can be seen by how Mick Schumacher completely destroyed his Haas car during qualifying. This was a race for Sergio Perez. He started on pole position, and off the line, things were looking good for him. For Fernando Alonso, however, things could have gone very wrong when Esteban Ocon decided he was going to give Alonso absolutely no room, and these two drivers would put on an excellent show, overtaking and re-overtaking each other multiple times, and also Ocon crowding Alonso into the barrier, much like Schumacher and Barrichello did in Hungary all those years ago. But for Perez, like I said, things were looking good until he decided to pit. Just after pitting, the Williams of Latifi put it into the wall, bringing out the safety car, which played perfectly into Leclerc and Verstappen's hands. When the race is back underway, those two were able to pull away, and towards the end of the race, the battle between these two resumed once again, with both drivers overtaking and re-overtaking each other, and also playing chicken with the DRS detection. But in the end, Max Verstappen was able to get past Charles Leclerc and was able to take victory and beat Leclerc. This race had an excellent 32 overtakes, which doesn't sound like a lot, but each overtake was incredibly entertaining. In 4th place is the US Grand Prix at Texas. Texas is a place that always delivers great racing, and this race was no exception. Max Verstappen at this point had already won the championship, so you might have thought it would just be another easy win for him and the race would be dull, but no. Texas delivered another thrilling multi-stop race. This was a race which had Sebastian Vettel leading the race for multiple laps, and also had Lance Stroll up there in the top 3 for a while. And things were going quite well for Lance Stroll. That was right up until the Alfa Romeo beached it into the gravel, bringing out the safety car. This bunched the field back up, and at the restart, Stroll swerved across Alonso, sending him into the air. But miraculously, Alonso managed to keep on going, and even finished in the points with a classic heroic Alonso display. Verstappen and Leclerc, though, were once again battling and dueling it out on track, but Verstappen's car at this point was just too strong in a straight line, and down the straight he was able to fly past Leclerc whenever Leclerc overtook him, and he was able to maintain the lead and eventually win the Grand Prix. This race had the most overtakes of the year, with 85 on-track overtakes. And now to the top 3, and this was so hard to rank because these 3 were all incredible races. But in 3rd place, I've gone for the Brazilian Grand Prix. This race was absolutely excellent. Not only did we get Mercedes' only win of the year at this race, but we also got some brilliant drives. Charles Leclerc had a brilliant recovery drive after colliding with Lando Norris and somehow managed to carry on, which honestly, I still don't know how he managed that. Verstappen also had a good recovery drive after colliding with Lewis Hamilton. Hamilton also dropped way down the order, but somehow managed to carry on without any damage after colliding with Max Verstappen, and he then went on an absolute rampage, passing cars left, right and centre. Somehow he managed to finish in P2 with Leclerc in P4 and Verstappen in P6. There were 77 on-track overtakes and all of them were very thrilling. Multi-stop races with cars down the field always provides exciting races. In 2nd place, I've gone for the Bahrain Grand Prix. The Bahrain Grand Prix, a race that gave us hope that this would be another fantastic close season between two drivers, a race which delivered a thrilling race with a shocking conclusion. The race that really did set the tone for the new era, and that was that these cars could follow, and most importantly, they could overtake. Bahrain may feel like a long time ago, and well, that's kinda because it was a long time ago, but this race really did give us an insight for the new F1. This was a 3-stop race, and was a race where we really got to see the new pecking order. Mercedes had taken a step back, and was behind Red Bull and Ferrari. However, reliability in the early races meant that Mercedes was still there and in with a shout. In the midfield, there was some excellent early racing between Haas, Alfa Romeo and Alpine, but it was up front where all the excitement was happening. Max Verstappen and Charles Leclerc, like in many other races later on in the season, put on an absolute show with some incredible, clean and aggressive racing. This weekend though, Charles Leclerc came out on top. The Grand Prix produced 78 overtakes and gave a great look into the future for the season. But as I said, reliability was still a factor, and both Red Bulls failed to finish the race, meaning that Lewis Hamilton was still on the podium despite being a lot faster than Ferrari and Red Bull. Which means that in first place, it was the British Grand Prix. And look, was it ever in doubt that this was the best race of the year? This produced an excellent Grand Prix. Everything about this race, except the Just Stop Oil protest, was brilliant. And well, I suppose also the huge shunt at turn 1. That wasn't ideal either, but it was brilliant to see Zhou Guanyu manage to walk away despite the huge impact. This race saw an excellent battle between Carlos Sainz, Charles Leclerc, Sergio Perez, Lewis Hamilton, and even Max Verstappen at one point, all battling for the win. Hell, even an Alpine and a McLaren was in shot at a win at one point. Early on, Max was cruising to what would be another victory, but suddenly, Sainz and Leclerc were all over him. Despite Leclerc having wing damage, he was still faster than Sainz, and eventually he got past Sainz and then got past Verstappen and took the lead of the Grand Prix, and all seemed good. That was until the safety car came out and everything changed. Leclerc was left out on used tyres, whereas everyone behind him stopped for fresh tyres, including his teammate, Carlos Sainz. On the restart, Leclerc tried his best to hold back Hamilton and Sainz and Perez, but it was no use. Sainz flew past Leclerc, and then Perez, Leclerc and Hamilton had a wonderful battle, with of course some great commentary by David Croft. Perez then got back past Hamilton, as did Charles Leclerc with a beautiful move into Cop's corner around the outside, but unlike in 2021, Hamilton didn't understeer into him. But later on in the race, Hamilton was able to get back past Charles Leclerc, and in the end, Carlos Sainz took his first ever Formula 1 race win from Sergio Perez in second place and Lewis Hamilton in third place. It was a truly brilliant Grand Prix, and it was the best race of the 2022 season. So there we are, that is my ranking of every single Grand Prix in the 2022 season. Do you agree with my list? Let me know down below. And as always, comment, leave a like and subscribe for more F1 content. Thank you all so much for watching this, and I will see you again soon. Thanks for watching guys. Bye.